And I'm smiling.
Hello. We're talking about flying cages.
For the last hour, those of us, those of you that were just with us on the other channel a minute ago.
We're talking about flying changes and anticipation. And we just had a Q&A session all about flying changes, which Herman helped me out with. He's on extra duty tonight. This is his punishment for giving me his cold.
Your horse show I got sick at.
You were horse showing too. So he gave me his cold, and then whenever I get sick, I always get this tickle in my throat, and then I start coughing and I can't talk. And it's happened a few times on a lecture or a live, and it's terribly embarrassing.
It's not good.
Luckily, when my mother was on and she had to save me, so tonight Herman's on in case of a throat attack. He's been coughing very loudly. Being sick isn't fun. Anyways, flying changes. What's your flying changes story that you're going to share with everyone today?
Well, the most dramatic one was Q. Q had a bunch of history, and when it got around to the point to teach him the flying changes, it was all kinds of exciting.
What did he do?
Well, the first time actually we went to go just ride a half pass, and you know how the half pass aid is quite similar to the flying change aid. So I set him up for the half pass, and we galloped out of the arena in a lesson. No less.
Left the arena.
Oh, yeah. And I heard Charlotte yelling, "Looks like you got into some history," as I left the arena. Like I said, he was kind of big. And then the other one is he would just break in half. He would twist. He'd leap to the side. He'd plant his head. He'd kick out. It was all kinds of things just to get him to stay calm.
And so how did you get him over that? How did you help him to get his flying changes?
I just stayed really patient, and I just repeated the aid, right? And we'd go back and we'd walk and we'd canter.
Go back to the basics.
Right, just calm everything down, walk, canter. And slowly he started to understand, oh, he's not doing whatever happened to him in the past. He's asking me to do this thing. Right. So because I had to overcome his history, right? Horses never forget what they know. Right. You can manage it, you can retrain it, but it isn't that they don't know that other stuff. And so he just, over time, he learned that I was asking him to do this, not whatever was asked of him before.
But it's amazing how Q, the horse Herman's talking about, once he knew the changes, he knew them. And Herman did the Grand Prix, and then I actually...
Oh, you got your silver medal.
I got my silver medal on him. So Herman was like, here, you can ride him. I had 2 weeks, so I rode the horse for 2 weeks.
It's here, go ride him, go get your medal.
And then, and that had 4 tempies and 3 tempies in it. So, it just goes to show you that there is definitely a learning curve when you're teaching the changes, and you kind of go through some of that stuff of, it does get a little bit exciting, but so long as you follow the principles and you go back to the basics and you do the exercises and you do the patterns, any horse can learn how to do the flying changes. We just had a question of someone who was like, my horse is long in the back, or I have a quarter horse, or my horse doesn't have natural suspension. All of those horses can learn to do the changes. Changes are a natural movement. It's just a matter of teaching your horse
to do it on command.
Yeah, to do it on command. So I did the Flying Changes webinar on Sunday. Enrollment for Flying Changes is open through this Sunday. So the link is above or below if you haven't signed up yet. Let me know, though, where are you on your flying changes journey? Are you nowhere near doing flying changes? You're dreaming of doing flying changes one day. Your horse is confirmed in the flying changes. I'm just curious to know kind of where you are on your journey. And then how would you describe flying changes? In one word, how would you describe them?
Fun.
Exciting. Exhilarating. Flying. Explosive.
It's that jump up they do when they come over. It's lovely. It's fun.
It's as close to flying as you're going to get without actually flying. And I think what's really magical about flying changes is that they're this moment of perfect connection and harmony with your horse, right? Because you think I want to do a flying change. And then you move your legs
And
and
the
then
horse goes, boing,
jumps up in the air,
flies
switches
over.
their forelegs in the air, and then you've done a change.
And you know, the flying part, right? There's also, I think, like a joy in the horse because they're a little bit like, wee, we're doing this thing.
Levi.
Okay.
We don't need any
Levi
background.
found his toy. He just had dinner. Now he wants his toy and he wants his playtime.
We don't need any background music. Okay, so here's a slide from the webinar. Let me see if I can find it. So this is an important, I feel like this is an important metaphor for life though, right? So it's the importance of smaller steps, which I think is so important anytime that we're training our horses. And unfortunately, what happens a lot of times with flying changes is that you just like one day you decide, I'm going to gallop across the diagonal and do a change. And you haven't really done all of these smaller steps. So that's why a lot of horses and riders, they get stuck or they feel like they can't do it or the flying change isn't possible for them, is because they haven't taken all of these little baby steps. And so what's really cool is that when you go back and when you take all these little baby steps and you go back and you focus on your trot canter transition and your walk canter transition and your counter canter, then before you know it, you can do a flying change. What do you think? Do you like my little
exactly
analogy?
Right.
So
because that way you're not all worked up and you don't have that thing in your head, oh, I'm doing a change, oh, I'm doing a change. And all that anticipation and everything works up in you. And then you attack that change and the horse flies off. And so if you do all those little things, then when you go to do the change, it's like, bink.
Yeah. And remember that flying changes are natural movement. Like horses, you turn them out in the field and they gallop around and
then when they go to change direction, they just switch and go.
Yeah. And so it's just a matter of teaching them to do it. Levi, no. Teaching them to do it on your aids when you ask. And every horse can do a flying change. So here's another question for you. Maybe some of you were at the webinar and you may know the answer to this. This is Harvey doing his Grand Prix. So how many flying changes are in the Grand Prix? Which I think that's interesting to think about because I'll give you a hint. It's a lot.
It's a lot.
We did the math earlier. But, you know, you think about it like you get to the Grand Prix and you have 15 one tempies.
That's just the beginning.
9 two tempies. You have like so many flying changes, and every single flying change is a perfect moment of harmony and balance and connection with your horse. So I see someone says 31 there. I can tell.
There's a couple of people there that know.
I can tell who was at the webinar on Sunday, but think about that. Like that is a lot of flying changes in a certain period of time.
In roughly 8 minutes, you're going to do 31 flying changes.
Yeah. And what's also important is that every horse's timeline for learning the flying changes is a little bit different.
Now for Betsy, I've done the Grand Prix with 33 changes and it didn't work out so well, but I've done it.
With a few extras?
I did a few extras sometimes.
Sometimes you miscount.
Oh, yeah. Or you're like, whoa, horsey, stop. And I had that.
But next point. Every single horse learns the changes differently. Some of them learn it really fast and it's like not a big deal. Others, it takes like a year and you're like, oh my gosh, is my horse ever going to learn the flying changes? So Harvey, my Grand Prix horse, teaching him the changes like wasn't that big of a deal because he just has like a super active, nice canter. Teaching Kensington the flying changes was nearly impossible. And I distinctly remember like I was in the arena and I got my phone and I called you and I was like, I'm never gonna get these. I'm just gonna give up.
You and him were ready to sell him because that canter was so huge.
It was impossible. It was
canter
so
was
hard.
Huge, and you were like, how am I gonna collect this? I was like, it's gonna be fine.
Yes, he's always the optimist and I'm the pessimist, so that's why we're good together. But it is important that you kind of stick to the plan, stick to the basics, keep working at it. And you can get there. Like even if your horse is a little older, even if your horse is not the perfect conformation or the right breed or whatever, you can do a flying change. And then we had this discussion before. So should you just ride across the diagonal and ask for a flying change, or what should you do to set your horse up for the flying change?
You could do that and you'll gather some information.
Yes. But I'm going to say that I personally don't like teaching the flying changes across the diagonal because I don't think that it sets you up very well. So what I like to do is I have like a bunch of different patterns or figures or places that I do the flying changes. And it's always important that you mark the spot by doing simple changes first before you do flying changes. So like one of our favorite exercises is the shallow loop serpentine. You like that one too, right?
Yeah, I like it a lot.
And part of why that works is because you do the simple changes at the same place.
So the horse is already the transition to the walk, gets the engagement in the collection and sets it up. And the horse says, oh, at that spot, I'm going to do this lead. At that spot, I'm doing this lead. And so then when you remove the walk step, but we were talking about that earlier, that you're not doing the canter from second level where you're trying to get a 10. You're trying to make those hind legs quick and reactive to your aid.
Yeah. And that's so much of training is figuring out like, how do you break it down so your horse understands? And I think a lot of times when it comes time to teach the trying changes, it's just like gallop across the diagonal and pray, or like kick your horse harder or give him a tap with the whip. But that doesn't really explain
There's no preparation. There's no learning in that.
And then that's why you get like Q, who would just like take off and run out of the arena, because that's how they tried to teach him the flying changes.
On the diagonal with the lunge whip.
Before Herman had him. So question in the chat. Are we going to answer that?
Which one?
You were reading all the questions.
Okay, so that's from Weave and Wobble. Did I read that right?
Yeah.
Okay, I know you teach students far ahead of me, but when your horse anticipates on the lunge line and he tends to counter canter, how do you set him up where he doesn't rush and he picks up the correct calm canter? And I'm going to talk about the bend there.
Yeah. So getting your horse a little bit bending to the inside. Lunging should be just like riding. So you should be able to like half halt a little, position your horse to the inside, then ask for the canter. And
so the lunge line acts like the rein and the lunge whip acts like your leg. So you should be able to take that inside rein and turn them a little in. And with that whip, drive them a little bit out so that you can get the bend. And yes, you can move your feet.
And it's also about...
That's not ideal, but you can.
It's also about the timing of being able to see like, oh, my horse is set up to take the correct lead. Then ask them for the canter. Don't just do it when your horse is like counter bent and rushing, or you're going to get a counter canter.
Right. So in the trot, you make sure you've got the bend and a rhythm. And Stacy, no, the changes go at the quarter line. The question is, are you saying to do a shallow loop serpentine but walk at X and do simple change? No, do the shallow loop serpentine and do simple changes at the quarter lines.
Yeah. And that's one of our favorite exercises to do the flying changes. I think one thing that we did this year for the flying changes course is we put together all these diagrams, which I think are really helpful because a lot of times I'll share the screen. It's a lot
easier to see it.
Yeah, a lot of times you like hear, okay, do this and do that, and you like don't really.
Picture, there's no image.
So this on the left here, this is the shallow loop serpentine exercise, and the little diamonds are your simple changes, and then the stars the flying change. So what you do is you start here at A on right lead canter, make a simple change, left lead canter, make a simple change, right lead canter. And you might just do this exercise with simple changes for like a month.
Yeah.
Like seriously, until you can really do it where you go like canter, walk one step, canter. And then once you feel like, oh, I've got this down with the simple changes, then you try a flying change. And if a flying change doesn't happen, guess what? You just
turn, you pick up the true lead and do it again on the other side.
Right. So what's really important is when you teach the flying changes, you need to know like a variety of different patterns and different ways to set up, because then what happens, your horse starts to anticipate this pattern and you have to try a different pattern. And what's really cool is that I think like both Herman and I, throughout our career, we've ridden with a lot of really wonderful top trainers. And that's,
it's made, I'm just so grateful for
yeah,
all the quality lessons that I've received.
But I feel like every trainer has like a different exercise or a different pattern to fix a problem. Like if your horse gets stronger, anticipates, do this. If your horse changes late behind, do this. If your horse isn't active enough in the canter, do this. And so when you're teaching the changes, you need to have a toolbox and kind of a library of different patterns and different exercises that you can use. And that's part of why I created the Flying Changes course, is because I wanted to document, like, so that I didn't forget, is like all of these cool exercises that you can do that will make you successful with teaching the flying changes. And I just added one that I learned like a couple weeks ago from Stephen Peters, which is really cool. And it's just about like using the arena and using geometry to set it up for your horse. And honestly, if I didn't have trainers or teachers showing me these exercises, we
would not be successful.
Yeah.
Right. We'd be out here trying to reinvent the wheel, right? It's already been done.
Yeah. And so what's cool about the online training is that, you know, it's at your fingertips. It's at the comfort of your home. I feel like really grateful. It's cool that we can sit here in California and help people
And that was a big
world.
question, was like, will this thing work?
Yeah.
And my friend Butch in Idaho, he was like, how is that working? I was like, you would be amazed that the people are learning and their horses are benefiting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so cool. This morning I did a lecture. We're doing 30 days around. I did a lecture on transitions, and 7 a.m. there were 100 people there, which was so cool. And we had a lot of people from Europe, which was really cool. But it's, you know, it's wonderful that you're out there and you're learning and you're trying to improve and you want to be better for your horses. And, you know, how lucky are you that the internet and like technology, because I didn't have any of this when I was growing up. I remember like ordering DVDs and I would get them in the mail and like watch them like 500 times.
We get those VHS tapes and
yeah. So it is really fun that, you know, this works. And it's also fun. A lot of times in Strides, we have video review sessions where students actually send in videos and then we're able to give them feedback. And Herman's been doing great with that as well. I've
been upping my technology skills there.
Yeah. So that's all very fun. So anyways, what other things do we have to talk about flying changes? The next thing is, okay, so I have another flying changes story. I was riding with a German trainer, which I feel like every time you ride with a trainer, you either like are like, okay, that's great. I like that. I'm going to take that home with me. Or you're like, okay, that doesn't work for me. I'm never doing that again. So I was at a show. It was like Friday before the show. And I was schooling. I was riding my horse Trump. I was getting ready for the Grand Prix. And I was doing like 2 tempies across the diagonal and then 1 tempies across the diagonal. And I kept making mistakes like over and over again. I just like, it wasn't working. He wasn't listening to my aids, whatever. It wasn't working. And the trainer was like, do it again.
Do it again. Do it again.
I mean, literally, it must have been the German.
That's when Juan Matuda, who is a genius, would be, that's too much German system.
And it was horrible. And I was so stressed out and I had a show the next day. And like my poor horse just getting more and more anxious. And it didn't go well. So then like fast forward several years later, I was riding with Yo Henneman and I was riding my horse Harvey. And for whatever reason that day, like the changes just, the wires weren't, you know, it's like the stars have to be aligned to get flying changes. And we were having trouble with our 1 tempies and it just wasn't working. And he was like, just go back, canter, walk, canter, walk, canter, walk. And then We did that for a few minutes. Okay, now go back and try your flying changes. And that approach worked so much better by like taking a few steps back, going to the basics, rehearsing the aid, and then trying the flying changes again. And that's one thing that's really important to me, like as a rider and a trainer, is if your horse isn't doing it, it's because they don't understand or physically they're not capable of it. It's not because they're like bad.
They're not malevolent. They're not trying to get over on you. They're
right,
horses.
Right. Like your horse isn't thinking, oh, I know you have a show tomorrow, so I'm just not going to do my changes today.
It doesn't enter into their sphere that.
Right.
They don't think that way.
So if you can go back and just show them like, this is the canter aid, canter, walk, canter, and then you can explain it to them, then it's like, it's so much easier for them. And that's one of the principles that I really teach in the flying changes course, is like the flying change is like the tip of the iceberg. And then under the water, that's all your basics. And your basics have to be perfect and they have to be solid so that you can have that little tip of ice that's above the iceberg, which is your flying change. Let's see. If anyone has questions in the chat, let's see. Eleni said
this one she's having some issues.
Oh, what does it say?
It's Janice, isn't it?
Yeah.
So my horse throws lots of changes when I try to make him slow down at canter. Why is he doing this? I'm not ready for that.
Well, lucky you. There's a lot of horses I wish would do flying changes.
Right. So that's a quality problem that the horse does changes, but you need to work on your relaxation, just on the horse calming down. And so I'd be putting him on a circle.
Yeah.
Spiral it in and out, that you can take the canter, spiral the circle in, the canter slows down, then you push him out onto the circle and you bigger the canter and back and forth. And what is it? The rubber band exercise.
Yeah. And also one thing that's really important to remember, especially if you are lucky enough, like if you have a schoolmaster that knows the flying changes.
Right. And that answers the second part. Why is he doing this? Because he's misunderstanding what you're doing.
Yeah. So always you should have inside leg at the girth and outside leg behind the girth. Like whenever you're in left lead canter, your left leg should be at the girth and your right leg should be just slightly behind the girth, because the canter is an asymmetric gait. So your position is a little bit asymmetric. Now your legs shouldn't be like clamped on your horse. You shouldn't be having a lot of pressure, but you should always get in the habit of holding that leg position so that when you're ready to start working on the flying changes, your leg position is what dictates the lead. That's how we get our horses to do 4 tempies and 3 tempies and 2 tempies and 1 tempi.
Right, changes. Because you have I sit like this in right lead canter body. I sit like this in left lead canter body. And you've got to be clear and precise. And so the horse goes, that's what you want. And if you're a little shaky, a little afraid, a little unsure, and you're wiggly and stuff, then the horse is just like, I'm guessing now. The horse starts guessing.
Yeah. So, it is a process, and certainly teaching the changes is a little bit more advanced, but it also, like, the better your trot canter transitions are, the better your position in the canter, like all of those fundamental things, even if you're not ready to work on the changes yet, even if that's like a dream of yours, like one day I want to do a flying change, start working now on your trot canter transition, on your position and your seat and your leg position in the canter, because all of that's going to set you up for one day being able to do the flying change. And remember, it's like those little baby steps.
Yes. And Camden says, steps. Is it like teaching a toddler? And I'm thinking, well, it's not, because you can beat children, right?
No. This is why we don't have children. We don't have children. Don't ask us. We have no experience. The dog is our child. So we have no experience with that. So anyways, lots of good questions. I think that, how did we learn to do the flying changes is a lot of horses. I worked with a lot of different types of horses. I worked with a lot of different riders, having good trainers, and just being brave to try it. It's
right. Experience counts in this horseback riding thing. And so it's just a lot of horses, a lot of lessons, and then develop feel.
Yeah.
So then you can go, okay, on this horse, I need a little setup of this. I want to move that a little bit over there, and boom, and then it goes.
Yeah. And one thing in the flying changes course is I put in like real life teaching the flying changes. So when I had the course, I had a horse, Leo, and he was learning the changes. And I like recorded the whole thing. I recorded like, okay, here's me getting him ready for the changes. Okay, here's like literally the first day I ever tried asking. There's a funny video in the flying changes course that I titled "When the Unicorn Doesn't Fly," because it was a day that I was like, I had Kane there and we were going to film for flying changes and I was going to work on the flying changes, and it just wasn't our day. Like he was too tight and too distracted. And sometimes that happens. It's like you have this goal of you want to teach the changes, and sometimes you just have to go back to the basics and work through that. And that's okay also, because the flying changes are, again, it's like the tip of the iceberg. It's like the motivation. It's like the cherry on top. You got to do all the basics so that you can have that flying change. And
you have to eat your meat before you get your pudding. That was Pink Floyd. Anyways,
so the other thing that I included this year in the flying changes course is I did some ride along podcasts for flying changes, because people have been loving those. So I talked through like, okay, here's a warm up for flying changes. Here's some of the different patterns. So you can listen to that in your ear, and that will also help you out for your flying changes. Let's see, Elena, how can you get more confidence to canter on your horse?
Well, it's on an owner horse, so I'm assuming she borrows this horse.
Well, how do you get more confidence to canter?
You put yourself in a safe position and canter. You put yourself in a lunging circle. You ride on a circle. You put yourself where you feel confident and safe, and go for it.
Or trot faster. That's also a good stepping stone.
Right. You can accelerate your trot.
Or do it on the lunge line if you have like a safe horse and a trainer. If you can get on a lesson horse.
See, somebody knew. Weave and Wobble knew the Pink Floyd reference. Somebody knew.
All right. Well, we've been on Zoom for an hour and a half now. Thank you for helping me out. I'm glad that I didn't lose my voice and I survived, because sometimes when I get a cold, I start like coughing and I can't talk, and it's terrible. Sunday is the last day to join flying changes. And yeah, we have a lot. We have a clinic this weekend. Very exciting. We're going to be taking some lessons. Levi needs some entertainment. I think we better take him for a walk and give him a squeaky toy. And let's see, Carolyn, if you already have the flying changes course, you get the ride along podcast. So for those of you who took the flying changes course before, log in, check it out again, because the podcasts are in there. There's a few new video exercises. There's a few of me teaching students. There's a good one of me helping a student fix her late flying changes. And the ride along podcasts are in there. So you don't have to buy the course again. Please don't. Just go in there and all the updates are in there. All righty. So
good night all. We'll see you in a week.